Tonight, we're going deep on a case that, well, it absolutely horrified the entire country. This is a story about 4 bright young college students whose lives were cut short in the most brutal way imaginable, and the massive manhunt for a killer that left a small town completely paralyzed with fear. It all kicked off with a phone call. You know, the kind of call a police chief hopes they'll never, ever get. On a quiet Sunday morning, those words, "a bad situation," well, that was the understatement of the century. That single call launched an investigation that would grip the entire nation. So the scene is a pretty typical student house on King Road in Moscow, Idaho. But inside, what police found was a nightmare. 4 University of Idaho students had been murdered while they were asleep. And get this, there were no signs of a break-in, no clear motive, and absolutely no suspect. Just a quiet college town waking up to pure evil in its midst. But look, before the story exploded into a national headline and before they became victims in a case file, there were just 4 young people. 4 people with inside jokes and dreams and futures stretching out in front of them. So let's talk about who they really were. It's so easy to get lost in all the details of the investigation, the clues, the theories, but at the heart of all this we have to remember is this just immense, staggering loss. 4 totally unique people with their own families, their own plans, all gone. First, you have Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Mogan. I mean, these 2 were best friends since the 6th grade, basically sisters. They finally got to live out their dream of being roommates for their senior year. And Kaylee, she was just weeks away from graduating. She had a job lined up in Austin, a whole new life about to begin. And then there was Xana Kernodle and her boyfriend Ethan Chapin. Friends said Xana was just electric, you know, full of life, bold, and fiercely independent. And Ethan, he was this incredibly kind, athletic guy, one of a set of triplets. They'd met at a party and just fell hard for each other. It was serious. Xana was already like a part of Ethan's family. With no suspect, no weapon, and not a single clue about a motive, fear just completely took over Moscow. It felt like the community was hunting a ghost. Everyone was terrified that a killer was still out there just walking among them. For the investigators, the pressure was just unbelievable. So investigators started to painstakingly piece together their last few hours. You have Kaylee and Maddie on camera at a food truck around 1:40 a.m., and they get home soon after. A DoorDash order comes for Xana around 4 a.m., and then at about 4:17 a.m., one of the surviving roommates says she heard crying, and then saw a figure in a mask, a man with bushy eyebrows, walk right past her door and out of the house. For weeks, the case felt stuck. Then it all broke open. It really came down to 3 huge clues. First, a white Hyundai Elantra was spotted on camera circling the house again and again and again. Second, a knife sheath was left behind at the scene, right under Madison Mogan's body, and it had male DNA on it. And third, cell phone data showed someone had been near the home a dozen times before the attack, and then turned their phone off right when the murders happened. Now, you'd think these clues would lead police to someone with a criminal record or a known connection to the victims. But no, they led them to someone totally unexpected. Someone who was hiding, quite literally, in plain sight, just a few miles away. And this is where the story gets really chilling. The suspect's name was Bryan Kohberger. He was a PhD candidate in criminology at a nearby university. I mean, the man studied the minds of criminals for a living. He even applied for an internship with the local police. And yet, all the evidence pointed right at him. He drove a white Elantra, his phone pinged near their house, and most damning of all, his DNA was a match for the DNA on that knife sheath. Kohberger was arrested all the way across the country in Pennsylvania after driving home for the holidays with his dad. And how did they confirm the DNA link? Well, investigators got DNA from his father's trash and used it to connect him directly to that sheath. It was a huge breakthrough. And despite all this evidence and the roommate's description, he's pleaded not guilty to everything. The arrest was just the beginning of what's become one of the most watched legal battles in years. And even though the wheels of justice are turning, for the families, for that community, this story is nowhere near over. So the suspect was caught, and the case moved into the legal system. The evidence that came out was just staggering. It painted a picture of someone who allegedly stalked these students, planned this attack meticulously, and then vanished into the night. Now, with a not guilty plea entered, the stage is set for a trial that will have the entire world watching. Prosecutors have made it clear they are seeking the death penalty in this case. In the months since the arrests, the house on King Road, it's been demolished. It was a painful but really necessary step for the town to even begin to heal. But out of this darkness, the families have done something incredible. They've created foundations and scholarships, making sure their kids are remembered not for how they died, but for the vibrant lives they lived. So while the case moves forward, the scars on that community, they're still very real. The story of the Idaho Four, it just leaves us with this really heavy question. When a town is touched by an evil that's so random and so completely devastating, how does an entire community ever really heal from something that is just unthinkable?